Next on Defending Life, find out how the Supreme Court has actually weakened the so-called right to abortion and even pointed to ways to advance the pro-life cause. Hello, friends, and welcome to Defending Life. I'm Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priests for Life and co-founder of the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. I'm also a co-host of the EWTN series, The Catholic View for Women. I bring you the personal greetings of our National Director, Father Frank Pavone, and we're pleased today to be joined by our Associate Director, Father Denis Wilde. Father, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Janet. Always great to be back.
Well, of course, we always like to start with a prayer and a reflection, which comes from the beautiful pro-life devotional written by Father Pavone called Pro-Life Reflections for Every Day, and it's available at the EWTN catalog, the religious catalog. So let's begin with a prayer.
Some scribes who were Pharisees noted that Jesus was eating with sinners and tax collectors, and they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" From Mark's Gospel. Jesus broke down the false barriers that people set up among themselves and instead acknowledged the equal human dignity of every individual, despite what common opinion might say. He moved toward those who needed his help, rather than rejecting them because of who they were. Holy Spirit, give us the mind of Christ that we may never cast off any human person or group of people, but rather be vehicles of your care for them. Amen.
Amen. And of course, this is a great little book to add to your daily prayers, you know, along with some people do the office, other people have other devotions in the morning, but I find this is a good way to add to those prayers, put the focus in on praying for an end to abortion and have a nice reflection. Well, as we say, you know, people, I think, get locked into thinking about this famous, infamous Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton, the two Supreme Court decisions from January 22nd, 1973. And of course, we know that Roe made abortion legal through all 9 months of pregnancy, right? And then Father Doe
versus Bolton, right? It was right at the same day. And a lot of people don't know about that one as much because Roe is the big one. But what Roe said was it made it legal to different trimesters.
Through all 9 months, right.
But what Doe did is spelled it out, and it said for psychological and for familial reasons, which meant to say, as it's interpreted in the courts, familial, boyfriend. If you don't have the abortion, honey, I'm out of the picture.
Right.
So that's not even familial as we would really understand it, but it's a casual relationship, and that's accepted in the courts as a reason.
That's right.
So it's absolute. It spells it out, and it gives it the a mark that is pretty strong. There's only 4 countries in the world that have absolute abortion up to the time of birth.
And I think what happens too is I think many of us, we're working always, you hear that phrase, to overturn Roe v. Wade, and we feel like we haven't made much progress. But recently, Father Pavone and I were over in Rome at the Academy for Life, and one of their key speakers recently was a gentleman by the name of Father Snead. He's a professor at Notre Dame University. And he's also the director of the Center for Ethics and Culture at the University of Notre Dame. And we sat down and asked him that question, what progress have we made? And let's see what Carter had to say.
In 1973, in 2 cases, Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, the court essentially invented a fundamental right to abortion, which means that any restriction on abortion would have to be subjected to the most demanding judicial scrutiny. The legal term of art is strict scrutiny, which in practice means any restriction on abortion must fall. Justice O'Connor, who unfortunately voted to sustain Roe v. Wade, at one point earlier in her career said that strict scrutiny, which is the judicial standard of review for abortion restrictions as per Roe v. Wade, is strict in principle but fatal in fact. And in this case, that has a very grave double meaning because we're talking about the killing of millions of unborn children. In 1992, Justice Kennedy, Justice O'Connor, and Justice Souter thought that they would craft what they must have considered to be a sort of statesman-like compromise to downgrade the right to abortion from a fundamental right, which is the most demanding right or the most protected right that we have in our system of jurisprudence, constitutional jurisprudence, to a protected liberty interest, which most people thought meant that there would be more leeway for the regulation of abortion. And in fact, Justice Kennedy in particular, I think, really genuinely believed that Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992 would give states greater latitude to express their support and respect for unborn human life. The problem is that the companion case of Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton, built in a kind of abortionist veto in that it defined health, which any restriction on abortion must have an exception for a woman's health. Health was defined as any aspect of a woman's well-being, not even physical or emotional, but including familial and economic aspects of her well-being. So it's a capacious, yawning definition of health that every restriction on abortion must have, and if that wasn't bad enough, the court in Doe v. Bolton deputized the abortionist as the arbiter of when that health interest was implicated. And if we had any doubts about what the abortionist would do, who obviously has a financial interest in a woman getting an abortion, and who believes in abortion because that's how they make their living, Warren Hearn from Colorado testified, or was quoted in the newspaper in, I think, 1996, as saying that he would testify in court that any pregnancy, including a healthy pregnancy, presented a sufficient threat to a woman's health to warrant getting an abortion, which means that there could be no restrictions on abortion so long as the abortionist claimed that some aspect of the woman's well-being would be benefited from it. And Planned Parenthood versus Casey didn't do anything to disturb that definition of health. So even on its face, it looked like Planned Parenthood versus Casey was a loosening of the absolute right on abortion. It turned out, as Justice Kennedy himself found out in the year 2000 in the first partial birth abortion case called Stenberg versus Carhart, that a procedure that the American Medical Association, a grisly late-term abortion procedure, partial birth abortion, intact dilation and extraction, it's so grisly that I wouldn't even describe it here, but believe me, it's a grotesque, grisly procedure that looks a lot like infanticide, that states, over 35 states who had banned that procedure, in a 5-4 vote, the court said, no, you're not allowed to ban that procedure, even though the AMA said there was no legitimate medical condition that would ever warrant that procedure. They said, no, because those laws didn't include a health exception, they had to be categorically invalidated. Justice Kennedy, in dissent, was outraged by that. He felt betrayed. He said, if we can't restrict partial birth abortion, then what on earth were we doing in Casey? In what sense is Casey a compromise or a moderating opinion on the absolute right to abortion? And his colleagues who joined him in the majority opinion in Casey, Justice O'Connor and Justice Souter were in the majority in that case, and they just said categorically, no health exception, the law can't stand. And of course, the health exception is an abortionist veto. 7 years later, in Gonzalez versus Carhart, Justice Kennedy, with the appointments of John Roberts and Sam Alito, especially Sam Alito replacing Sandra Day O'Connor, got 5 votes to sustain the federal Partial Birth Abortion Act, even though that act did not have a health exception. Justice Kennedy wrote the majority opinion. It's the opinion in which he talks about silent no more and the special wounding of women from abortion and the importance of informed consent laws. But he also made the point that the government generally can legislate even when there's disagreement among experts about the medical need for a particular procedure. Now, there was an evidentiary hearing in New York City in a federal trial court in which the court concluded that there was no medical necessity ever that would warrant a partial birth abortion. That was an opinion in the Southern District of New York, and that was an important opinion because the evidence that was developed in that case on the way to the Supreme Court in 2007 was important to convince Justice Kennedy that there was substantial body of medical evidence showing that a health exception was not needed. So Gonzalez versus Carhart is the most promising moment that we've had in the past 40 plus years with respect to the question of abortion in the Supreme Court, because it opens the possibility of new informed consent laws, of pushing back against the absolutist definition of health from Doe v. Bolton that allowed the abortionist to veto any restriction on abortion that the states might provide.
Very interesting points Carter makes, and we're going to discuss this more when we come back right after this break, so stay tuned.
Not until people saw images of children in coal mines did they enact child labor laws. Not until people saw images of human torture did they rise up against slavery. And now, after seeing these images, what will you do? Priests for Life Because America will never reject abortion unless America sees abortion. Call now to learn how you can help.
You are looking at the face of an unborn child, 25 and a half weeks into pregnancy. This child can be legally killed by abortion in America. As this ad from the Yellow Pages proves, some abortion clinics sell abortions up to 28 weeks. Abortion kills living children whose hearts are beating and whose bodily organs are all in place. Abortion. Haven't we gone too far?
Welcome back to our Defending Life program, and we're discussing the success we've made so far with the Supreme Court, believe it or not. Well, Father, Carter Snead made some pretty good points, didn't he?
He sure did, and it's important for people to recognize the United States Supreme Court does not regard abortion as an absolute right. It is not a fundamental right like freedom of speech. There can be more restrictions and prohibitions on abortion than on speech. With the 2007 Supreme Court decision, Gonzalez versus Carhart, the Doe versus Bolton health exception wall is finally cracking. The partial birth abortion ban, which the court upheld, does not have a health exception.
I mean, and that's important right there, isn't it?
It sure is.
Because what they did was they banned the partial birth abortion procedure with no health exception at all. I mean, so that really is progress. And you know what? I think we forget when you say that we're making these things, we're making advances because we're so focused on just overturning of Roe v. Wade. We're not looking at the progress that's really been made, And then, of course, we had a chance to sit and chat a little bit more with Carter, and he made another good point. So let's see the other part of what Carter had to say from that interview.
In Gonzalez versus Carhart, there were scores and scores and scores of letters and amicus briefs filed by women who had abortions and who gravely and deeply regretted their abortions. And these testimonies had an extraordinary effect on Justice Kennedy, who is the most important member of the court when it comes really to anything, but especially on the question of abortion. There are 4 justices on the court right now who would be willing to overturn Roe versus Wade and return the matter to the states to be resolved in the political process. There are 4 justices on the court who want not only to sustain Roe v. Wade, but to strengthen it, to undo Planned Parenthood versus Casey, an opinion that in a very modest and minor way ameliorated the problems of Roe, certainly didn't get rid of them. Justice Kennedy doesn't seem at the moment to be willing to overturn Roe v. Wade, but he has sustained every restriction on abortion he's ever considered, except for one, spousal notification in 1992. But back to Justice Kennedy is deeply affected by the human stories in all the cases that come before him. And it's clear that the women who were suffering from their abortions in the past had a similar profound effect on him. In the opinion itself, Gonzalez versus Carhart, he mentions them. And he mentions the fact that there are women who got abortions without being fully informed or fully understanding or appreciating the nature of that action and the consequences of that action. And there's an entire section in the opinion essentially inviting state legislatures and even perhaps the U.S. Congress to strengthen laws on informed consent, and very beautiful language from Justice Kennedy about the bond of love between mother and child being the foundation for all relationships in human society. So the witness of the women, the silent no more women, the women who regretted their abortions, was absolutely essential in persuading Justice Kennedy about the ugliness and evil of abortion and the harms to women from the abortion culture and the legal regime of abortion on demand that we have in this country. So it's both a model for going forward, and it's also important. It's an important voice to hear, and it's an important counterpoint to those voices that claim that women monolithically favor abortion rights. Nothing could be further from the truth. And those women who have been wounded by abortion directly through their own abortions are indispensable to our conversation, and not just our conversation, but also to the decision-making on the Supreme Court.
I just like Carter's explanations. They're so clear, and precise. Because sometimes when people start talking about the courts, I get confused. But he really helps us understand. And I'll tell you, Father, I was always very encouraged when the Supreme Court noticed the testimonies of the women. Because when you think about it, the Carhart was in 2007, and the women started giving testimony in front of the Supreme Court at the March for Life in 2003. So it took a few years of this getting out there in the public square, but that regret was written into the decision. And I remember when that came down, I could tell you on behalf of the women in the campaign, They were excited. They felt like someone finally heard our voices, and I think that was so important, right?
That's terrific. Yeah, the AMA even said that there's no legitimate reason to justify partial birth abortion, and that's why they came up with that. But the influence that we had was several years before that decision actually met.
That's right. Well, of course, there's some final points we want to make sure our viewers understand.
It's important that people recognize, yes, that the United States Supreme Court Gonzalez versus Carhart decision in 2007 that we're talking about here, it seems unexceptionable to conclude some women come to regret their choice to abort the infant life they once created and sustained. Severe depression and loss of esteem can follow. This is the justices recognizing this. And
that's right.
That
and I mean, it's the words quoted directly from the decision, Gonzalez versus Carhart.
Yes, they're quoted, yeah.
You're lifting it's right from that decision, so, you know.
The court pointed out that the precise statistical evidence about this regret was not available, but that it was nevertheless relevant. The court thereby signaled that the gathering and the measuring of these testimonies, as well as the continuation of post-abortion research, is an important way to move forward in dealing with abortion. That's important for us because even the courts themselves are recognizing we should be part of the change.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why the encouragement and even the expansion, I think, of the campaign now, you know, where we have the healing of shockwaves, where now it's the mothers, the grandmothers, the siblings, you know, these are all voices saying that, yes, the women are regretting the abortion, but it's impacting all these other people.
And we should be encouraged with what's happening on the state levels with other things that we've been talking about on other of these issues here.
That's right.
And those are very helpful, so we don't get bogged down in thinking it's just a federal area.
Right. Well, because I think, too, like we said in the beginning of this program, too often everyone focuses in on just the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and they're not realizing, like Carter has pointed out, the progress of, there's always been what you would call a body of decisions since Roe v. Wade that have been cracking and chipping away. So I think that's the goal. We're going to continue to chip away, right, Father? Okay. And then one day we're going to see abortion eradicated in our country. It's all of us acting, praying, and doing what we can to change hearts and minds and bring an end to the Holocaust of abortion. Right?
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a break, Father, and when we come back after this break, we're going to take a question from you, our viewers, and give you a few more action things you can do to help bring an end to abortion. So stay tuned. Two of the most popular prayers in the pro-life movement are the Rosary and the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. Now, through a new CD set, you can pray the Rosary along with Father Frank Pavone, who offers his pro-life meditations on each mystery. And along with it, pray the Chaplet of Divine Mercy through another CD set. Did you know that this prayer was given to Saint Faustina especially because of the sin of abortion? God revealed to her that because of this evil, the world needs his mercy more than ever. He even permitted St. Faustina to suffer special pains representing the pain of abortion. Father Frank explains these connections between divine mercy and the pro-life movement. This is especially important in the light of the Jubilee year of mercy proclaimed by Pope Francis. Contact us at our toll-free number, 888-735-3448, or go to prolifeproducts.org to order these beautiful CD sets. Thank you. Welcome back to our Defending Life program. Now we're going to take a question from you, our viewers. Well, Father Denis, today's question comes from Lucas, and he's from Troy, Michigan, and he writes, I've read some powerful statements from the Pope and the Bishops' Conference about our responsibilities to vote pro-life, and that energizes me. Then, when I try to do the things in my own parish to get people to vote pro-life, I'm told we can't do that. I'm confused.
Thanks for your question, Lucas. I think we understand that one. One of those powerful quotes is from the American Bishops' document, Living the Gospel of Life. And it says, we encourage all citizens, particularly Catholics, to embrace their citizenship not merely as a duty and privilege, but as an opportunity meaningfully to participate in building the culture of life. Every voice matters in the public forum. Every vote counts. Every act of responsible citizenship is an exercise of significant individual power. This is a clear and stirring call to be active at election time. So it makes sense that people who are tuned in to what the bishops are saying should take this to heart on a parish level. So yes, it is confusing for the faithful to be then told by their priests that they should not be so active. For instance, we've seen pastors who do not want to have voter registration drives or distribute a voter guide, even when the guide has been legally approved. The simplest explanation for this unwillingness is that they don't want the fight. In other words, even if they have a good legal advice, which they don't always have, and they know that it is okay to do these things within the right parameters, they are afraid that someone will complain and they will have to defend themselves in their parish. So to avoid that, they avoid the controversial activity altogether. Of course, as in all things, honesty is the best policy. If a priest does not want the fight, he should say so, but he should not place the blame on the government for prohibiting something that is not prohibiting. Another great quote from the Living Gospel of Life is this: "We get the public officials we deserve. Their virtue or lack thereof is a judgment not only on them, but on us. Because of this, we urge our fellow citizens to see beyond party politics, to analyze campaign rhetoric carefully and critically, and to choose their political leaders according to principle, not party affiliation or mere self-interest." Let's take that to heart. And thanks again for your question. My friends, anytime you have a question for our Priests for Life team, just go to prolifequestions.com and we'll respond to you.
Well, of course, Father, that Living the Gospel Life document is so important. I know it came out in 1998, but it's like the marching orders from the U.S. Conference of Bishops.
Well, it's the best thing they've come out with on
Really
in this area.
And you and other members of our Priests for Life family and Father Pavone, we wrote a study guide for that document. And this is a perfect time. An election is coming up, and it's like the race has already started, as we know, with people announcing who's running. It's time to really study what the bishops have told us. Like you just read some nice quotes, but why not delve into that whole document? If they contact us, we'll...
It's not
short.
that long. It's
short.
16 pages or so.
Exactly. And we have a beautiful study guide that both you and Father Pavone collaborated on, and other members of our team, and we'll send it to them. Just contact us at Priests for Life to get that study guide. I think that's a good place to start, really, because, and then activities in the parish, well, if the parish priest won't let you do certain things, well, you can still do it among the people you come in contact with. I remember when my daughters played soccer, I used to tell them I would put out the voter registration and the campaign literature on the soccer field on the cars of the parents while they were on the soccer field. So all this is possible.
Many ways to do it.
There are many ways to do it. Well, Father, thanks again for a wonderful discussion. I know we learned a lot from our friend Carter Snead, and there's just more always to learn. I never amazed at what we can learn as we go along, right? Excellent. Well, brothers and sisters, thank you, too, for joining us on Defending Life. And before we go, let me offer you 2 items. The priests at Priests for Life are happy to remember you and your loved ones at Mass. We'll provide you with Mass cards for the living and the deceased so that you can use them when the occasion arises, whether it's a christening or a wedding or an anniversary, a birthday, funeral, or just a special time of need. Let us send you a supply of Mass cards today. Second, if you are concerned about making medical decisions for yourself or your loved ones, Priests for Life provides a document that is legally and morally safe to use to appoint a healthcare proxy at your own choosing who can speak for you when you cannot speak for yourself, and who will carry out your decisions consistent with your faith. Contact us today for this document called The Will to Live. And remember, you can invite Father Pavone, Father Wilde, myself, and other members of our Priests for Life team like Alvita King and Brian Kemper to your churches, communities, and pro-life events. Check out our website at priestsforlife.org for details. And on behalf of Father Pavone, our National Director, and all our Priests for Life family, I urge you to let us hear from you. Send us your success stories or your questions and comments. And please connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and more. See Priests for Life for links to these and other platforms. And remember, there are some abortions only you can stop and some lives only you can save. Join us again next week on Defending Life.